Hi folks, so it's book haul time again. So yes, I fell down a deep book buying hole. I spent a lot of time on eBay and World of Books just idly scrolling through a filtered list of hardback books, trying not to spend too much money but seeing what I could get. And the answer to that was quite a lot. So we've got 40 books to get through here, so let us get on with it. The first couple are Stephen Baxter replacements for paperbacks that I have, perfectly good paperbacks, almost unread looking, that I've got on my shelves. So I've got Time and Origin. I've already got Space in the hardback, so this is the first three of that Manifold series by Baxter. There is another one, Phase Space, which I don't have the paperback for. I think I've read it, but I don't have the paperback for it. So now I have, you know, the nice full set of those, which is cool. Yet another book that I already have a perfectly good paperback for, but felt obliged to find it in hardback, is Anathem by Neil Stevenson. This is a really great book. I really recommend it if you haven't read it. It's quite, characteristically, it's a Stevenson book, so it's pretty chunky, but it's really good. It's set in a world where it's a little bit like Canticle for Leibowitz. It's set in a world where there are like enclaves of science, and it's set up like a monastery. So it's like there are cloisters, there's choirs, there are something equivalent to a mass, but it's all geared around the preservation. It's not religious. It's all geared around the preservation of science and knowledge in a world which goes through spasms of Holocaust and apocalypse. And they have a clever structure where you sign up for 1, 10, 100 or 1,000 year sub enclaves within each monastery, and obviously no one lives for 1,000 years, but if you sign up to be a millenarian, then you're in an enclave which doesn't come out of the monastery for 1,000 years. So they have set periods where they come out. So if you're a 1-yearer, you're probably the son of some wealthy politician or whatever on the planet, and you go in to experience life in one of these monasteries, or a mathic, and or a math rather, and so they do a year, and then they come out after a year, and they have a big kind of coming out party. And then 10 years is a bit of an event, once a decade. 100 years, once the centenarians come out, then there are potentially people who are coming out. Well, there are people that are coming out for the first time in their life. Anyway, it's a really good book. If you haven't read it, get your chops around that. It's a substantial meal, but I think it's really good. I've read it a few times. I also got, as a recurring theme here, another book that I have a perfectly good paperback of. So I've got the trade in this, and foolishly, this is one of 2 different books in this haul that I ordered twice. So I ordered, I made a big order on World of Books, and then somehow wiped the basket, or they lost it, whatever. I had to start again. So in my sort of hurry to replicate what I'd already ordered, I did this one twice. I picked a well-read copy, and you know, if World of Books is describing something as well-read, then it's an absolute dog's dinner, and indeed it was. It didn't have a cover, it's falling apart, so that's ready to be pulped at worst. At best, find its way to a charity shop. But this one is in okay condition. It's a first edition from, the others are all first editions as well, by the way, from 1993, first published by Viking. So yeah, this is his Viking book. It's in the top of the dust jacket's a little bit battered, and there is some wear on the bottom of the spine, but generally speaking, it's a nice copy. Okay, staying with relatively recent stuff. Diamond Dogs, Turquoise Days is, I think it's 2 novellas by Alistair Reynolds, one called Diamond Dogs and one called Turquoise Days. So it's not short stories, it's 2 novellas set in the Revelation Space universe. I think I've read it years and years ago. I don't think I have this one in paperback, but it's a small format. I don't know what the correct name for it is. It's a sort of B format, same sort of size as a B format paperback. And that's in really good condition. That doesn't have any real flaws. The dust jacket's in good condition. The book itself is fine. Text box may be a little bit yellowed, but not drastically so. And it is a first edition from 2002. And next is another Reynolds, this time one I don't have a paperback of, Pushing Ice. I've been looking out for it, haven't found it. And this again is almost in really good condition, except that there's some shelf wear on the jacket, on the spine, where it's got a bit battered there on the base, which is a shame, but otherwise it's in good nick. And that, in contrast to the other one, is enormous. So that's a B format size. There's a proper name for it, I can't remember. And then that's a royal format, so that's the biggest kind of size of hardback you can get. It's a proper chunky one. And then I've got a few Ken MacLeods. So The Star Fraction, that's a book of his that I have read. I've got a few more in paperback that I'm yet to get to. I think I've got The Stone Canal, is it, on my TBR pile for this month. So yeah, so that's one I have read. It's a first edition from 1990 something, I think. It's got a little inscription from it, not from the author, from a randomer. To Tim, happy birthday with love from Linda and Philip. I hope Tim enjoyed it. That's from 1995. And then I've got Newton's Wake, which is not a book I know anything about. I haven't read it. I don't think I have a copy of it either. He's the modern day George Orwell, apparently, according to the note on the back. So let's have a look. So this is a new standalone epic of galactic conflict and human folly. The hard rapture took Earth's best minds away, and now the rest are about to find out where they went. Centuries ago, space settlers and soldiers fled to the stars from the sentient AI war machines that engulfed Earth. They colonized Eurydice, a planet whose rocks contained traces of its own war machines, some of which still guard a vast enigmatic artifact on a remote tundra. Well, sounds exciting. So that's a space opera. It's a standalone book, a singleton. It is, by today's standards, quite slender. It's less than 400 pages. Not a squirrel killer. It might lightly bruise a squirrel, but I think it would survive. And then another MacLeod, Learning the Void. It's a first contact novel. So this one deals with the Fermi paradox. If there are billions of planets in the universe that are capable of supporting life and millions of intelligent species out there, then why haven't we encountered any? It is indeed a mystery. The great sunliner is nearing the end of a 400-year journey. A shipborne generation is tense with expectation for the new system that's to be their home, expecting to find nothing but bacteria and algae. As they get closer, they detect electronic signals, which comes as a shock. On a world called Ground, which is the planet that they're heading to, whose inhabitants are struggling into the age of radio, petroleum and powered flight, a young astronomer searching for distant planets detects an anomaly that he presumes to be a comet, which I'm guessing is the spaceship. Anyway, that tees it up from both ends. Learning the world. Sticking with the modern era, or the contemporary era, it's Peter F. Hamilton, Misspent Youth. So this is a novel set in the same universe as the Night's Dawn trilogy. It's in our near future, and it's about the sort of beginnings of the rejuvenation treatments, the longevity treatments that are prevalent and drive the plots in some respect in those books. And what I hadn't noticed until just now is that it's signed by the geezer himself, Peter Hamilton. That's I think 3 of his books that I have randomly acquired, some in charity shops and some via the likes of Order Books, that have been signed. So that's in really nice condition, basically as new. And then another Hamilton, Manhattan in Reverse, which, if I remember rightly, is short stories. Yeah, so A Second Chance of Eden was the first collection of his short stories, and this was published 13 years later, a new collection. It includes Manhattan in Reverse, an original and exclusive story featuring the popular detective Paul Amayo from his best-selling Commonwealth series. So that's got only seven stories in it. It's quite a slender book, unlike most of his. And then I've got an Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I think is a singleton, The Doors of Eden. It is a parallel universe type story. So there are parallel Earths, and they're leaking into each other and causing us grievous issues. And it starts with 2 girls, one of whom goes missing. The Doors to Eden. Don't know anything much more about it than that. I just read that on the inside cover. It's in okay condition. The book itself is fine. The spine's maybe a little bit flaccid from being sort of read rather aggressively, and the dust jacket's a bit knackered. So it's not perfect by any means, but it'll do. What do you want for £3.50? Right. So it gets a little bit more interesting now, I think. So the observant among you will note that this is not a hardback. And it's in this haul because I forgot to include it in the last one. In my defence, it does look a bit like a hardback. It's a trade paperback. It's very shiny. It's in excellent condition. So Sherry S. Tepper, The Fresco. She's not an author that I know much about or have read anything. So this one, according to the blurb on the back, the bizarre events that have been occurring across the US, unexplained oddities, tracked by air defence, mysterious disappearances, shocking deaths, seem to have no bearing on Benita Shipton's life. That is until the softly spoken 36-year-old bookstore manager, I like her already, is approached by a pair of aliens asking her to transmit a message of peace to the powers that be in Washington. So essentially this lady becomes the ambassador, the conduit through which all communications between Earth and these aliens happen, and I think she ends up going to their planet on a road trip. The peril in the book comes from the fact that these aliens are not the only spacefaring species making their presence known on Earth. There are others, cold, malevolent, hungry, who have now set their sights on Benita and their accomplices, maybe as close as Capitol Hill. Interesting stuff. I gather that her writing's awesome, so I'll be very intrigued to read that. And then an indulgence on my part, I bought read Thunder by John Varley the other week in hardback. I had a very tatty old paperback which I've read, I don't know, like a dozen times. It used to live in our downstairs loo, so I would read it sort of 50 pages at a time whilst doing what one does in the downstairs loo, and got very threadbare as a result. But so I've got that in hardback, and I've now also got Red Lightning, which is the second book of 4. I think the third is Thunder and Lightning, I think, and then the fourth is Rolling Thunder, or something like that. I'd like to get them all. As I said the last time when I had the first one, Red Thunder, then they weren't published in hardback in the UK, so these are all US editions as Ace hardback. You can get them from time to time in the UK, obviously, so I'll look out for the others at some point. And then another throwback to a paperback that I have read to death. I haven't read it for quite a while, but I went through a phase of rereading it a lot, kind of getting to the end and basically going back to the beginning and starting again. I really like it. There's Legacy of Hero or Herot by Niven, Pornell and Barnes. So this is the UK first edition of that book, from 1987, published by Gollancz. It's a rather nice copy. It's in really good condition. Nothing wrong with it. So whilst it's not, you know, a genre classic or anything, it's a book that I really enjoyed, and I'm very happy to have it. I might even retire the tatty old paperback that I've got. So next I did something a bit stupid. So this is the second of the 2 books that I bought twice by being an idiot and not realising or forgetting that I'd already put one in the basket. So Greg Bear's Legacy. I'd like to get all of the Eon related books. I think I've got them all now, apart from Eon itself, so I need to find that. So this is Legacy. It's a prequel to Eon. This is a US first edition. It has been a library book from the Leon Public Library in Iowa, of all places, and it was, according to this, withdrawn twice. But it's in really nice condition. It's got as library books often do, it's got a plastic cover on it, so that's protected the dust jacket. It's in perfect condition, you know, as you might expect from a book that's only been read twice. So I also got, I'm an idiot, the UK first edition as well, which is a slightly bigger format, as you can tell. So Legacy, that is also in really nice condition, also from 1995, and this is a UK first edition from Legend, which is a Random House imprint. It's maybe actually slightly, that one's got very white pages, that one's slightly yellowed, so maybe the US one's in slightly better condition actually, but the sensible thing to do would be for me to get rid of one, sell it or pass it on or something. But because I think if they were identical I would do that, but because I think one's the US first edition, one's the UK first edition, I'm going to keep it. So I also got, only one this time, UK first edition of Eternity, which is the sequel to Eon. So I've kind of like bracketed Eon, but I don't have the bloody thing. So I will need to find that at some point when I'm allowed off the naughty step for spending a fortune on 40 hardback books. Bad scavenger. And this is also in really nice condition. It's got a little bit of damage to the dust jacket at the bottom of the spine there, but otherwise it's in, you know, splendid condition. So next, tell me that's recording. Just need to check that the sound's on. I think it is. I've done a couple of videos recently where I didn't have the microphone turned on. I had to do them again. Robert Silverberg, At Winter's End. So this is a far future sort of dying earth type book in the spirit of Jack Vance and Gene Wolfe from 1988. So he had a bit of a renaissance in the 80s and 90s where he got back into writing science fiction or science fantasy. So this is set, as I say, in the far future. So it's a far future tale, as I say. There are Death Stars coming. They're not the Star Wars type of Death Star. One by one, they would crash down terribly from the skies, falling without mercy for thousands of years, bringing fire, darkness, dust, smoke, cold and death, an endless winter of sorrows. All right, Robert, no need to be melodramatic. And some survive and they emerge, or the descendants emerge into that new and very different world. It was a world in which the remnants of Earth's former greatness were to be found, but also a world in which there were many dangers to be faced, old perils and new threats, such as altered bands of other humans. So that sounds like fun. At Winter's End, I'm a couple of books into my Silverberg reading experience, and so far it's been excellent. I gather that his later works were not quite as strong as not quite as groundbreaking as his earlier stuff. I expect the writing's still really good. That's the important thing for me. So I look forward to reading that. And then another nostalgia trip for me. I've got these in paperback. I've had them since I was a teen. I've read them 2 or 3 times probably over the years, but not for a long time. And I was among the things that I was browsing for was to see if you could get these for reasonable money, and indeed you can. So these were not expensive, between £6 and £8 maybe, 10 maximum. First edition of Heliconia Spring by Mr. Aldous. I've got the second one here as well, Heliconia Summer. I don't yet have Winter, but I'm on the prowl for it. There were copies available, but they were listed on World of Books as good, which is always a bad sign. There's a small chance that you might get one that's in, reasonable condition, but generally speaking, good is a euphemism for a bit shit. So these were listed as very good, and this one, Spring, is basically perfect. It's in a protective wrapper, so the dust jacket's in excellent condition. It was last sold for £25 according to the inside cover of this somewhere. And it's not as new because the page block the text block is a little bit faded, but generally speaking, it's in tip-top condition. It's got nice wraparound art. Look at that, lovely. And so does Summer. So if you're not familiar with these books, the premise is that this planet is in a binary star system, and the complex orbit that the stars weave around each other means that the seasons on the planet are extended, and so kind of Game of Thrones style spring, summer, autumn and winter last for hundreds or even thousands of years, and that has a big impact on the ascendancy of civilizations, evolution even, and I really like them. There's a bit of sort of quasi-religious kind of shizzle going on in them, but my memory anyway is that I really enjoyed them. I'll be interested to see if that remains when I do it. So I've got a line on Winter, on the book Winter, the third one in the trilogy. I'm going to the Isle of Wight. In fact, by the time I publish this video, I'll have been to the Isle of Wight, and I may already have got it. So if I have, I'll insert it right here. So if it's here, then you know that I've been successful in my mission to acquire the third of the 3. And if I don't, then I failed. Right, so mission accomplished. I had 2 or 3 used bookshops to visit in the Isle of Wight. I think I managed to get to 2 of them, plus a few charity shops where 1 or 2 things were acquired, and those will come in a future haul. But as previously stated, I did get hold of Heliconia Winter, which is in very nice condition. So I now have the full set, which will look lovely on my shelves. There's no fading. There's a tiny bit of barely noticeable sort of scrunching on the bottom of the dust jacket at the base of the spine. Text blocks maybe a little bit old and faded, but it's in perfectly acceptable condition. It's first edition from 1985, so they're not especially rare. You can get them for under a tenner, but so it's more of a nostalgia buy than any great collection value as such. I'll add this one in as I'm here because it's a hardback, and we're doing hardbacks today. I found this in a charity shop, I think, for £2 or £3. Foundation's Edge, that's the 4th of the Foundation sequence, at least in publication order. I don't have any of the others in hardback. In fact, I'm missing a few, even in paperback, from the more recent additions to the series. But since it was there, it's a Granada from 1980 something, 83, first edition. Cost me £1.99 in an Oxfam. Can't argue with that, can you? Alright, so that's my little Isle of Wight interlude. Back to the main programme. So rather hopefully, I found listed on World of Books a hardback of The Wizard of Earthsea, which is the first of the Earthsea books, first of 4, and this one's from the early 70s. I mean, it didn't cost me much, a few pounds, and I thought rather hopefully that it might be an original first edition. It's not. It's a Heinemann New Windmills. It's almost like a ladybird. It's the covers, the image, the illustration is printed directly on the outside of the cover of this book. It was first published in this format in 1973, but this is at least the 14th edition, or the 14th impression or reprint, whatever. So it's nothing special from an edition point of view. It's a nice copy. I have the whole set of 4 in a omnibus paperback edition, but it'd be nice to get them in the original hardback. So I guess I have to wait till I find that. I got Jack Vance's The Face, which didn't have this image. That's the downside of World of Books. They do say in the terms and conditions that the image that you see isn't necessarily the one that you get. So this is actually a science fiction book club edition. And what I also didn't realise, because I was just wasn't really paying attention, I was just going, oh, Jack Vance. I bought it. It's actually the 4th of the Demon Prince's novels, so it's useless to me until I find books 1, 2 and 3. But nonetheless, it's nice little B format size hardback. It's very slender, so that'll fit on my shelves no bother. And actually fitting on my shelves is a big problem here. As you can tell, I've got a bunch of hardbacks, some of them pretty fat, and no room to store them, so I've got a shelving challenge. Alright, back to Mr. Aldous. This is Ruins, and again in my sort of magpie. Oh, an Aldous! I added it to my basket without really paying much attention to what it was. It's a novella. It's not science fiction. It's one of his books that is not SF, and this follows a couple of characters. It's less than 100 pages. It's illustrated throughout with black and white ink drawings. It's a rather nice copy. It's got wraparound art all the way around. So, you know, it's not SF, but it'll do. And then I think this was his final book. Finches of Mars, was it his final book? Yes. In this, his final science fiction work, Brian Aldous has produced a fascinating and thought-provoking novel that considers the practicalities of man's exploration of space. Finches of Mars is shot through with trademark wit and visionary philosophy that has been ever present across the 7 decades of the author's writing career. So, Finches of Mars by Brian Aldous, again, some wraparound cover art. It's a first edition, but it is slightly damaged. There's a bit of a tear on the dust jacket there. Sticking with Brian Aldous, author of the aforementioned Heliconia trilogy, A Tupelo Too Far, which is a collection of short stories from 1993. This was collected. The 12 stories in his latest collection from Britain's best loved and most respected science fiction author resemble a mindscape of places as close as Prague, the Sheraton in Aswan, an Oxford garden where an orgy takes place, happy days, and Moscow, and as distant as the afterworld, a cabbage planet, and the heart of our galaxy. The voices too are various: the man in Budapest without memory, the solitary who sailed around the globe, the cockroach who finds his Kafka. But nothing is quite what it seems. Moscow, for instance, is not the Moscow expected by the salesman hero of the title story, who leaves Penge on a Royal Russian jet and lands in an Aeroflot to discover an absence of the high-tech sheen for which Russia was renowned. So that's a sort of alternative worlds gig. It's in really good condition, apart from there's a bit of foxing on the pages. And then we've got another short story collection, only this time it's Roy Bradbury, the Toynbee Convector. There are 23 stories in here, most of which begin in familiar rooms and landscapes of our lives, in our common thoughts and memories, and then take off through the farthest reaches of the imagination. So given that there's 23 in there, it's not an especially thick book. I'm guessing that they are short stories. It looks like it's sort of 10 or 15 pages each, which will be nice. So those are pretty bite sized. His writing is very good, so I'm looking forward to that. It's a nice cover. It's not wraparound art this time. This is in excellent condition. Didn't cost me a huge amount of money, a few pounds. Okay, onward with what I found in the deep hole that I fell in. So Bruce Sterling, Holy Fire. I thought I'd ordered as well Bruce Sterling's Crystal Express in hardback, but as you might have seen from a recent paperback haul, that ended up not being a hardback, it was a paperback, despite being listed as a hardback. Anyway, to assuage my disappointment, I do have Holy Fire by Bruce Sterling. It's not in awesome condition. The front of the cover is nice, but the back's a bit of a mess. It's got some dirt on it which I haven't been able to clean off, and some damage to the top of the dust jacket there. Mia Zeman is 93 years old with decades of living before her, cracking under the weight of ennui. So she may have the mind and body of a 30-year-old, but she's seen it all and done it all. So this sounds like a rejuvenation, kind of longevity treatment type thing, and the impacts that might have on humanity and our state of mind. And then we've got Interference by Sue Burke. I haven't been able to find Semiosis, which is the first of the two. As you might have seen from my Sentient Plants video recently, I really like Sue Burke's writing, and I enjoyed the second one almost as much as the first one. As a pair, they're really good, I think. It's quite a slender novel, uncharacteristically these days, a mere 300 pages, and it's set about 100 years after the first one, and there are even more sentient plants in this one than there are in the first one. They're really good books, actually. I recommend them thoroughly. And then we've got Greg Egan, Oceanic, which is a short story collection dating back to 2009. It's the first edition, collected together for the first time, are 12 stories by the incomparable Greg Egan. I've got 2 or 3 short story collections, so I need to check whether these are all net new for me or if they're a repeat. Hey ho, it's a hardback. It's in nice condition, apart from a couple of bit of dings on the top cover. And then I found a couple of Claire Norths. Claire North is a writer that I have read only one book by, but I have a couple now. I've read The End of the Day, which I really enjoyed. She is the author of the first 15 lives of Harry. Is it Harry August? I think so. Anyway, so this is 84k, and I think that is a reference to the value put on a human life for insurance purposes in this sort of slightly dystopian future. From one of the most original new voices in modern fiction comes a startling vision of a world where you can get away with anything. Theo Miller knows the value of human life to the very last penny. 84k, I imagine. Working in the criminal audit office, he assesses each crime that crosses his desk and makes sure the correct debt to society is paid in full. Anyway, that traces what happens to him when his ex-lover is killed or dies somehow. And judging by my one and only reading experience of Claire North, I expect that to be good. And I've got another of hers as well, which is in slightly less good condition, is Touch, and this details the story of somebody who can transfer their consciousness from one body to another simply by touching them. So they somewhat inhabit the now switching is easy. I can jump from body to body, have any life, be anyone. So that's interesting. It's on the back here, one of the cleverest, most compelling books I've read in a long time. Intoxicating, ingenious and intricate. Claire North is one hell of a writer. There are more, don't go away. So I went on a little Christopher Priest tear. I've only read one of his books, Inverted World, and that was from the very beginning of his writing career, and he's written a bunch of other stuff since. He has said himself that he doesn't like to be pigeonholed, so he doesn't really see himself exclusively anyway as a science fiction writer. So some of his books are not SF, or only very mildly so. So this one is from the 70s, A Dream of Wessex. It's a Faber first edition with lovely wraparound art. I'm pretty sure it's the first edition. First published in 1977. Yeah. So there's a bit of a testimonial on the front here. It is now clear that Mr. Priest is not going to trot around and around the same old orbit, but is a versatile, autonomous writer from whom we can expect nothing expectable. And that was from Ursula Le Guin in the Times Literary Supplement. So that was about his previous novel, actually. But that's really nice. It's in perfect condition. Considering it's nearly 50 years old, that's rather nice. That's a sort of B format size hardback. And then I have another one as well, which I paid a little bit more money for, The Affirmation, which strangely has 2 covers. I don't know why that would be. It's got 2 dust jackets, both of which are in very good condition, although the first one is price clipped, as they say, and someone's cut the price off. In praise, this is interesting, in praise of Christopher Priest's previous novel, the aforementioned A Dream of Wessex, John Fowles wrote, "I can best convey its quality by saying that I think not only H.G. Wells, but Hardy himself would have enjoyed and approved of it." So, that looks rather nice. It doesn't have much in the way of cover art. It's rather austere, basic even, but in perfect condition. The pages are are tight, the spine's good. Very nice. And then more recent books from him, I have The Adjacent. Yes, so this is set in a sort of near future where Britain is something called IRGP, I don't know what that stands for. A nation living in the aftermath of a bizarre and terrifying terrorist atrocity. Hundreds of thousands were wiped out when a vast triangle of West London was instantly annihilated. So there's your science fiction element. And there are interconnected plot threads, judging by the blurb on the inside cover. And the Adjacent is a novel where nothing is quite as it seems, where fiction and history intersect, and where every version of reality is suspect, where truth and falsehood lie closely adjacent to one another. So that's where The Adjacent comes from. It shows why Christopher Priest is one of our greatest writers. So that's rather nice. It's got what look like World War II era planes on the front. Don't know why, I guess I'll find out when I read it. And then sticking with Mr. Priest, we've got The Gradual, which I think is a more recent one. I think, actually, I forgot to say. So The Adjacent is from 2013, so 10 years ago. And The Gradual is from 2016, so these are more recent books. So Alessandro is a gifted musician and composer in the dour authoritarian Republic of Glaund, a fascist state constantly at war with another faceless opponent. So shades of 1984 there, I guess. Occasionally Alessandro catches glimpses of islands in the far distance from the shore, and they feed into his music. And then he's unexpectedly sent on a cultural tour. What he discovers on his journey will change his perceptions of his country, his music, the reality of war, and the ways of the islands and time itself. So, sounds intriguing. His writing in Inverted World certainly was excellent, so I'm looking forward to this. Nice book. And then I've got Walk Away by Cory Doctorow, prolific tweeter. I think I said before, I made the mistake of following him on Twitter and then had to mute him because of just the astonishing variety, astonishing quantity rather, of tweets and retweets and quote tweets, or posts as they're called now, I think, on X, were a little bit overwhelming. So I shut him up by muting him. But still, I have a few of his books now. I haven't read any, but that's a nice copy, except that I've just noticed it's got a bit of a ding on the cover there where it's just been caught on something. So that just needs sorting out somehow. A hard-edged look at our immediate future and the high and low points of human nature. Incisive, compelling and plausible, it says. And there's a quote here from Edward Snowden. Walk Away reminds us that the world we choose to build is the one that we will inhabit. Technology empowers both the powerful and the powerless. And if we want a world with more liberty and less control, we're going to have to fight for it. Okay, so it's got a nice little peekaboo kind of cover. There's a hole there, and the cover, the underlying cover, is printed as well. And it's rather nice. So aside from the little tear on the back, that's in really good condition. So next up is Iron Council by China Mieville. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Maybe it's Melville. Mieville, I think. So this is the third book in the trilogy, whose name I forget. Baz something or other. So Perdido Street Station is the first and Scar is the second. I read the first one, don't have or read, and I haven't read the second. It's weird fiction. I think that's the label that it's given, the subgenre, and indeed a lot of weird shit does happen. So it's not quite horror, it's not quite fantasy, it's not quite science fiction. It sits somewhere at the sort of centre of that particular Venn diagram, and I got it because it was in good nick and it wasn't very much money. So now I will feel obliged, obviously, to get the other two in hardback. And next was Richard Morgan rather, is Market Forces. So this is not set in his Altered Carbon series. It's a singleton. 30 years from now, the big movers in global capitalism have moved on from commodities. The big money is in conflict investment. And that's where Shaw and Associates come in. They keep a careful watch on the wars of liberation and revolution that burn constantly around the world. And they gauge who the winners will be and sell them arms, intelligence and power in return for a slice of the action when the war is won. The reward for the investors? A stake in the new nation. So, that doesn't sound terribly democratic, does it? So, Market Forces. And then we have Stephen King's Dark Tower, which I think I paid like £4 for or something like that. It's in really good condition. Well, actually, it's not in really good condition, let me confess. So the dust jacket is not too bad. It's got some wear on the top, and it's certainly been read. And as often happens with big fat books like this, the spine gets a little bit bent out of shape when that happens. The text box got a bit of scribbling on it. But I have books 5 and 6 in hardback. So I am looking for the others if I can find them. I think the first 3 will be challenging to find unless I can find them in a reprint in the same format. But I should definitely be able to get book 4, Wizard and Glass, I think it's called, which will pad out the set a bit. But anyway, I've got them. This is a series that I really like. Well, that is it. So that's all the hardbacks that I got recently. I think, as I've said before, and failed clearly to do, I need to rein in my book buying and be more discerning and deliberate, just plugging gaps where I see them, picking up classic works by some authors. I tend to be, my book buying tends to have an element of supermarket sweep rather than anything particular or discerning, so I need to move from that end of the spectrum to the other. And the only reason for that, apart from spaffing huge amounts of money on books, is I don't have the space for it. There is a bit of wall space that I'm contemplating putting some shelves on, which will provide a bit of breathing room, but it's not sustainable for me to keep buying books at the rate that I have done over the last few months. We'll see how I get on with that. All right, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time, but bye for now.